I'm going to be reading from my fifth novel, which I haven't finished yet, and it's called Hauser and the Vultures. Set in 1981, the novel follows an ambitious British rock band as they continue on their European tour, crisscrossing the continent, a tour that culminates in disaster, madness, and ultimately murder. Hauser and the Vultures are a post-punk, pre-goth alternative band in the same vein as Susie and the Banshees, or Echo and the Bunnymen, or Jesus and the Mary Chain. Hauser and the Vultures. Their gimmick is that they perform as vampires. The lead singer, Dan Claremont, assumes the role of Hauser, a kind of sexy German vampire prince. So this is from side 1, track 1, Kill Me First. December the 13th, 1980, the Ship Pub, Soho. Leanne felt as though she'd just stepped into the pages of a cheaply printed horror comic rather than a packed London pub. Mind you, if this was a horror comic, she considered, as she cleaved a path through the crush of monochromatic Vulture fans, it wasn't an especially scary one. "Fuck me," she shouted to her new friend Simone, as she eventually found her way to the bar. "Someone wants to tell this lot that Halloween was months ago." It was unlikely that any of the surrounding ghouls, with their long leather coats and whitened faces, could hear Leanne's comment, and besides, she herself could hardly talk. When she eventually caught sight of her reflection in the bar mirror behind the spirit bottles, she was horrified. She'd been aiming for Susie Sue's look: Egyptian cat eye makeup, powdered cheeks, deep red lipstick, hair dyed black, but her reflection revealed the unflattering truth. She looked less like a banshee and more like a sad panda. "Everyone looks killer," cried Simone in her thick New York accent. I can't do a New York accent, so just imagine it's really good. All these gothic-y outfits, I love it. "I can't see Colin and his buddy anywhere though," she complained. "They're bound to be hiding near the John at the back. Colin hates the goths." "Why'd he get tickets for the Vultures then?" Leanne asked, after shouting her order for 2 rum and cokes at the barman. He didn't. His mate did. Matty's a music critic and gets tickets for everything. He writes for the London Crier. Drinks finally in hand, they explored further and discovered that Simone was right. The lads were lurking near the lavatories in the recesses of the pub, trying not to be noticed among the Hauser impersonators as they smoked their cigarettes. They looked wrong for both the scene and wrong for each other. Colin was the last punk standing, stubbornly sporting a green buzz cut, a Sex Pistols t-shirt, and a chain hanging from his left nostril. Meanwhile, Matt, the music critic, had floppy, unsprayed hair, round spectacles, and a boring brown jacket that matched the boring brown ale he was drinking. He was skinny, long-faced, and reminded Leanne of someone. They both seemed half-cut already. "Good week for music lovers everywhere," the punk grunted. "I mean, someone had to do it." "Huh?" asked Simone over the sound of the Cure track, playing from the tinny speaker above. "Put the old hippie out of his misery," Colin explained, and made a shooting gesture. "Colin's expressing admiration for an assassin," Matt told the girls in a thick Liverpudlian accent. I can't do a Liverpudlian accent either, by the way, so again, I'm not going to try. Colin thinks it makes him sound tough, but I suspect he's crying on the inside. The accent made Leanne realise who Matt reminded her of. John Lennon, who'd been gunned down by a stranger in New York earlier that week. "The only good hippie is a dead hippie," Matt interrupted the punk. "He said that 3 times tonight." "The same could be said for Scousers," Colin sneered. "Hey, Matty, I've just told Leanne that you're a music writer. She's real impressed, right, Leanne? She loves music, writers, and she loves Scousers, so you're in with a chance." Leanne didn't even try to disguise her scowl. She'd previously expressed limited interest in writing Liverpudlians or, for that matter, music. At least not the Beatles. She turned to Matt. "Hold this," she said, giving him her glass. "I'm going to the ladies to wipe this makeup off. I look like a pigeon shat in my eyes." 10 minutes later, they were walking the short distance from the Ship Pub down to the venue on Wardour Street, along with several other concert goers. The night was getting colder, and she was regretting her decision to wear a short skirt and fishnet tights. Colin and Simone were further along the pavement, not looking where they were going, their faces so close that Leanne worried that Simone's nose piercings might get stuck in his punk chain. Leanne zipped up her leather jacket, ignoring Matt's poor attempts to chat her up, and changed the subject to Hauser and the Vultures. "So, you sharpening your knives?" she asked. "Your readers hate Hauser, right? Too artsy-fartsy for them. The only singer they want to hear about is Barry Manilow." "The Crier pages are a little cooler than that," Matt shrugged. "But yeah, I'm going to give the Vultures a hard time if they're as crap as their recent singles suggest." "You don't rate them?" "I rate Dan Claremont, or more likely I used to rate him before he got involved with this silly outfit. I preferred the folk band he and his wife were in a couple of years back. Completely different. Do you know their stuff?" "I don't listen to folk," Leanne said. "Well, you should, because it's better than what we're about to see." Claremont was authentic then, not pretending to be some Dracula figure singing about biting people's necks. The Vultures are for children, really. It's panto stuff. Leanne wondered if she agreed with that. Truth is, she'd enjoyed what she'd heard from their second album, but was reluctant to admit it, in case they were shit tonight. Their spooky-wooky aesthetic was definitely embarrassing, though. He was right about that. They've ridden the tails of better bands like Bauhaus, The Cure and The Damned, and they've commercialised their sound, Matt continued, as if composing his review already. They're fakes, especially the lead guitarist, cocky little gobshite he is. They remind me more of Queen, which is the most insulting thing I can say about any band. Colin there can think what he likes about John Lennon, Matt continued, indicating the insensitive punk ahead of them. But at least he was himself. He wrote songs about things that mattered. These days, Dan Claremont only appears as Hauser, talking in that fake German accent, saying nothing of substance. Just a nice suburban boy playing make-believe that he's a monster. I mean, they don't deserve a good press with that carry-on. "Good to see you're going into this with an open mind," Leanne remarked as they approached the doors of the Marquee Club. A long line of Vulture fans had already formed. Some of the men were wearing sharp black feathers in their hats, just like Hauser. "We don't need to queue with these freaks," Matt told the other three. "I've got my press pass." After the doorman tore their tickets, they walked down a long corridor, following a thumping bass line, through to a black-walled, sticky-floored space. A punk band called The Clench were playing upon a cramped stage, but only about 5 people were dancing. Matt suggested they get drinks. "I wouldn't waste any ink on these losers," he said, as he bought himself and Leanne beers at the bar. Then he asked her how old she was. 17, she answered, after swigging from the bottle. "Or I will be next month." He looked perturbed. "Colin told me you were older." Colin and Simone were soon sitting at a small round table at the furthest corner from the stage. She was sat on his lap, and Colin's hand was already on her left boob. Leanne and Matt pretended not to notice and just awkwardly looked around at all the poor imitations of Hauser slowly filling the room. Black-clad white boys using makeup to appear even more white. They seemed scarier in here than they had in the pub. "Punk is dead," Matt suddenly said, as if answering a question she hadn't asked. "I hope so," she agreed over the terrible racket being made by the Clench. "I was never a fan of all the gobbing." "It reached its squalid climax a year ago," he continued, "when Sid Vicious killed his junkie girlfriend. He ended it there, in that hotel room, just as the Manson family killed the hippie movement in the summer of '69. It's all fun and games until people start getting murdered." "You're a chuckle," she told him as the Clench played their final song to scant applause. She could feel an unease growing within her. Surveying the army of necromantics entering the hall behind her, she wondered what kind of bloody event would bring this dark scene to a close. Mercifully, things picked up when the next band came on. Cockney Witch were a female-led post-punk high-energy 4-piece, and they were a blast. The lead singer, who called herself Creeping Virginia, sang in a thick London accent about class, sex, witchcraft, drugs, garden allotments, and managed to make all of that sound like it was the same thing. Leanne responded immediately, feeling like each song was written for her. She rushed towards the band, and it was only once she got caught in the scrum at the stage edge that she realised that Matt had not followed. She looked back to where they'd been standing and saw him still there, staring at her through his glassy round specs, and she pogoed. When Cockney Witch finished their 2-short set, the place was now fuller and the crowd was primed for the headline act. Leanne was sweating something chronic in her thick leather jacket, and most of the made-up faces around her were now smeary black and white messes. She headed back to the bar, desperate for a drink before the Vultures arrived. "If you give that lot a bad write-up," she panted when she found Matt hovering near the back, "then you've got shit in your ears. My round, yeah?" After she'd handed him another beer, Matt told her that he found Cockney Witch to be somewhat derivative, but was pleased that she'd enjoyed it. Leanne rolled her eyes at his apparent inability to have fun and drew nearer so she could whisper in his ear. To any onlookers, it would have seemed like she was going in for a snog. "We need to get a buzz going," she told him. "What you got?" "Excuse me?" "Gear," she clarified. "Simone said you'd have. I mean, come on, we can't drink this weak piss all night." She tapped her beer bottle. "You're too young," he said. "Too young? You're a Scouser, aren't you? I thought you lot take LSD for breakfast at like 10. "What a delightful image you Cockneys have of my people," he replied. "You know what? You're too old, mate. You dress like my dad and he was 39 when he kicked the bucket. What are you, like 50? "I'm 22. "Too old for dancing, too old for scoring, might as well be 50. She pulled back from him and looked through the crowd to where Colin and Simone still were. They were laughing like idiots and touching each other's face studs. "They're on something," she observed, "and by the time the Vultures get on, the whole crowd will be, apart from us. Look, are you carrying any gear or not?" More of Hauser's creepy fans crushed in around them. The room was hotter and noisy, but from chatter rather than music. "Why do I feel I'll regret this?" he sighed and reached into his jacket and swiftly slipped something into her pocket. "Here, take it to the bogs," he whispered. "You don't want to get caught with it." "Cheers, La," she smiled, impersonating his accent. Then she scuttled away. The ladies' loo smelt skunky and had walls plastered thick with stickers for obscure bands. Leanne doubted she was the only girl in there trying to get high, as she waited for a free toilet and ignored the many posters warning against the dangers of heroin, amphetamines and cannabis. When she finally got inside a cubicle, she saw that the lock was busted, and so, plonking herself down on the toilet seat, sat with one big soled boot pressed against the door. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small see-through baggie of white powder. "Wow," she thought, "that old man out there must be doing all right." She'd not expected cocaine. But was this a little or a lot? To be honest, she'd never done much of anything before, just a dab of speed at a Camden youth club and the odd bit of glue sniffing. This would be a new experience. Minutes later, she'd snorted it all, taken a pee, flushed and stepped back out into the bathroom feeling invincible. There was a bunch of older girls crowded around the scratched mirrors, brushing their sprayed hair into spiky shards. Elbowing herself some space, Leanne saw that she'd been less successful earlier in wiping away her makeup than she'd hoped. But she still had enough baby wipes on her to remove the rest, but placing both hands on the sink and leaning closer to inspect her reflection, she found that she didn't hate it. It looked ghostly to her and cool. She watched with interest as a big grin broke out across her little goth face. The sight delighted her. She couldn't remember the last time she'd seen her own smile. And it was in that moment, just as she was grinning at herself for the sake of grinning, that a mysterious and beguiling sound filled the room. It was an electric guitar, delicate but somehow sinister, and it struck out from the stage. Instantly recognisable as the intro to the Vultures track, The Haunt, from their debut album, it had an almost supernatural effect inside that little room. At the mirror, the girls either side of Leanne stopped what they were doing and quickly exited the room as if summoned by a higher power. Hauser, their vampire prince, was close at hand. And that's it. Thank you very much.